But well, you had mentioned on your email that there's a lot of abortion related news in New York and around the nation right now. And I wanted to ask you, why do you think that the Democrats are all of a sudden getting super interested in pressing for abortion rights at this time? Is there any reason that you can think of?
Uh, Not really, except they are overplaying their hand, I believe, as people come to understand what this legislation is about.
Hmm.
They may think the American public is with them, but I think they're going to wake up to something very rude.
Hmm.
There will be a strong opposition
Uh-huh.
that will even raise up those who have been somewhat on the fence.
Hmm.
And I think this will get those who have been kind of indifferent about it lately to say, hey, wait a minute, this is what this culture of death progressivism is about. If that's what it's about, I don't want any part
Hmm.
of it.
I think you're right. Um, I was wondering though, what is this big push by, for example, Mario Cuomo? He's a Roman Catholic. He says he loves his church. He says that he disagrees with his church on certain issues, but he's still a good Catholic. What is his, why is he pushing this so much right now?
Because I think it shows who he really is. He is a culture of death progressive. He's playing his political hand, which is what he's really all about,
Hmm.
and sending his Catholicism along with the right to life to the back end of the bus where it sits
Hmm.
silenced and gagged, as well as segregated.
Hmm. Yeah, he definitely is putting his church in a big pressure packed dilemma because if you've seen on some of the interviews, Fox News, and I know I was watching The Blaze, Glenn Beck's podcast, and Matt Walsh, the Christian commentator, and all these people are talking about the fact that the Roman Catholic Church, while it stands for pro life issues and is a major part of the March for Life in Washington, the bishops themselves don't seem to have any courage enough to actually confront Cuomo and say, you have to choose whether you want to be Catholic or you want to be Democratic, because there seems to be a divide there that he is throwing his own church under the bus every single opportunity he can. And the Roman Catholic bishops like Timothy Dolan in New York City, they don't seem to have any guts to do anything about it.
Yeah, I heard Timothy Dolan on Fox and Friends, and he was rather skittish about this whole excommunication thing because he thought in the end it would serve the church worse, meaning opposition against the church would be generated because of this possible move to excommunicate Andrew Cuomo as a Catholic. Um, so, as I understood Cardinal Dolan, it almost sounded somewhat political as far as their reasons not to do it. Uh, and then you could also say, but would this serve the church in its best interest? I think is what he was also trying to communicate.
That's what my impression was, is that here is a man who's supposed to be the shepherd of the flock. He's supposed to be a spiritual leader, and he's talking like a politician, and he's making calculations as to what would be popular, what would find support among people, and so on and so forth, instead of asking the question, is this member of our church straying into false teachings and obstinance to the teachings of our church, and what do we do about it? And he's always calculating the political ramifications of, say, like an excommunication. And I saw another interview by another bishop, the one of Albany, and he was saying, well, first of all, it's not my jurisdiction. And then he said, second of all, excommunication is a possibility eventually if it came to that. And I was thinking in my mind, well, what would it take to actually
Right.
get to a excommunication? Because this is a politician who is thumbing his nose at his own church, and he's actually taunting his own church and saying, I dare you to excommunicate me. I'm going to light up the buildings in the rainbow colors, and I'm going to make a big show of this abortion legislation right in your face, and I dare you to do something. Don't you think a little bit of that is in Cuomo's mind? He's taunting his own church to try to make some kind of move on him.
Yeah, he's acting like a braggart in this situation, being boastful about it. And
Hmm.
Dolan did admit that Cuomo looks like he's bragging, given all the celebration
Hmm.
that was garnered over the signing of this legislation. You'd think somebody like that would be so embarrassed they would try to do it in the privacy of their own office without any cameras running, so that this would have been done completely dark at night. But no, Cuomo wanted to make a big show of it,
Big show.
not only in the signing, but like you said, in what he did in lighting up the buildings there in New York City.
Right. And it's just disgusting to see these politicians try to say, well, I'm a good Christian, but I'm for the killing of a baby. Now, do you understand, you've thought this through, you've done research, the bill that is passed in New York, what does that do exactly to abortion? What is that actually saying? Because it's in the headline saying this is the most liberal, far-reaching abortion legislation in the world. Is that correct in your estimation?
I think it is, because I think it virtually strips every restriction
Mhm.
in New York's already liberal abortion laws. So, in practical
Mhm.
purposes, there's no restriction to abortion right up until seconds before birth.
Yes, and are you also under the impression that a woman could go into labor in the New York State under the New York State bill? She could be going into labor, and then the pain of childbirth got so bad that she says, "That's enough. I can't take it anymore. I'm under mental stress and physical pain. I want an abortion." And they would legally have to give her an abortion just minutes or even seconds before a live birth. Is that would also be included in this bill, right?
That's my impression, indeed. When I read that bill, and it's so hard to read the legalese, the
Mhm.
way in which a bill is written, but what I noticed in that bill was a word coming up again and over again, being repeated constantly, and that word was repeal, repeal, repeal. And what were they repealing? The previous restrictions.
Mhm.
So I feel like it's unrestricted
Mm.
abortion, meaning they say it has to be done of the mother, the emotional state of the mother, but you could make up any excuse you want to, and that excuse would be good enough, such
Right.
as, what if the woman becomes emotionally traumatized over the quote wrong sex of her
Mhm.
unborn child?
Mhm.
She could get an abortion if she put it under the aspect of emotional trauma caused by the child being the wrong sex. That's
Exactly.
my
A
understanding.
number of different excuses could be given because after all, you have a sympathetic doctor. You might actually seek out a sympathetic doctor that would refer abortions or actually perform abortions, and then all he would need is some excuse. You have to give him some excuse. If you
Right.
didn't have an excuse, he would probably encourage you to come up with an excuse. You could say,
Yeah.
well, I don't feel well, or I have a headache, or there's some kind of distress or something that could be called distress. And then he would sign off for the abortion. Now, do I also understand that there needs to be only one doctor signing off on this, or is that, am I confusing that with the bill that was defeated in Virginia?
Possibly, as I understand it, though, a doctor need not be present during the abortion.
Hmm.
Uh, the aspect of the signature, I don't know about that for sure. But what we do know is that during the procedure,
Hmm.
a doctor is not required.
Oh,
So
now
it's
that's
so,
so insane because here you're going through this surgical procedure, or even if it's a non-surgical procedure, and now you just have to be a physician's assistant, or you could be a nurse practitioner, or any of these lesser offices, and you don't even have to have a doctor that is basically coaching this thing, and you can have an abortion. That is really scary.
I find that so ironic because the pro choice community have always said we want abortions to be safe. It just made them all the more unsafe. And like
Exactly.
Cardinal Dolan said, instead of safe, legal, and rare, what we are finding in New York State is dangerous, legal, and frequent,
Yes.
because the floodgates have been opened legislatively all the way to slaughter the innocents.
Right. And now on top of that, that was enacted, was it a week and a half ago or so, just less than 2 weeks ago. And now we had this situation a few days ago where the governor of Virginia was on a radio program and he was trying to explain this legislation that was before the Virginia Assembly that would legalize abortion up until the time of birth. And he even went beyond anything that was even in the bill. Are you up on that?
Yeah, I found that governor from Virginia to be an advocate of infanticide, as if the baby has been delivered,
Hmm.
is on the table, and says, well, if the mother and doctor then decide to resuscitate, then that's okay. To me, he was implying or clearly insinuating that the baby
Actual
is best
infanticide.
the mother, yeah, unless the mother changes. I
Yeah,
know he's been trying
outrageous.
to explain himself jargon, but to me, his explanation from the start shows that there are some within the Democrat Party, these progressives, these leftists, that want to take abortion now
Mhm.
into the area of infanticide.
Right, and did you notice, I don't know if you were watching that interview, the women who were, sitting around the table and the woman that was interviewing him, he said this, which was clearly articulation of infanticide, where he
Mhm.
says, well, the baby would be delivered and would be made comfortable, and then the physician and the mother would discuss, and with the implication of they would discuss what to do with the infant, whether to let it live and take care of it or to let it die, which is infanticide. That's the very different definition of infanticide, when you have a child who was born and then you kill it or let it die. That's infanticide. And the interviewer at the radio station, she just nodded and didn't follow up with any questions of her own and saying, wait a minute, are you saying what it sounds like you're saying? Did you happen to catch the people at that table that were near that radio station studio? They didn't seem to react like you would think a normal person would react when someone's describing infanticide for the first time in public.
Yeah, which may uncover their bias as interviewers. They may be in agreement with the
I
governor.
think
And
they were.
given the, given the kind of political persuasions we're finding, especially in the mainstream media,
Mhm.
that wouldn't surprise me that they were okay with that, that they would give a green light to that. Um, Otherwise, they were just totally oblivious as to what
Mm.
they were doing and let that go right over the top of their head. Um,
It's
and
just
that,
unbelievable.
yeah, it just kind of,
Unbelievable. I mean, I think this is the first time that a politician has ever publicly advocated infanticide. I cannot think of any public official who has ever articulated the idea that the baby is born, you set the baby aside, you talk it over with the physician as to what to do with this baby, whether
yeah,
to kill it or to let it live. Now, I have never heard of any public official. I mean, we've heard, you've heard probably also about the academics talking about
yes,
infanticide. The Princeton so-called ethicist Peter Singer, you've heard of him,
yes, right.
and he has articulated this kind of position where you would kill a child up to, I think it's 6 months. The mother and the father has the right to terminate the child's life up to 6 months if they don't feel that that child's life will be worthwhile or whatever. You've heard his arguments, right?
Yeah, I even heard up to 2 years. But indeed,
Wow.
he is a professor that suggests or supports infanticide. And this is where these ideas started. They seem to
Yeah.
start in academia.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing them filter even into government.
Oh boy. And people, just regular voters, regular citizens see this stuff, and I think you're right. I think most Democrats, I cannot believe that voted for even their pro-abortion politicians. I don't think most Democrat citizens would go along with that. I can't see that they would sign up for something like baby killing.
Right. And I thought I saw a statistic on television of the American public, which basically said only 16% of Americans support trimester abortions.
Yeah.
And I thought that was significant. Uh, and yet you have this
Mhm.
fringe extremist group in the Democrat Party, in a mainline party, pushing for this kind of stuff.
Exactly.
And sadly, our own Governor Andrew Cuomo, to me, is the abortion beast of politicians. And he has enough liberal support, leftist support, working family party support in New York City to get this through. And we realize elections have consequences because New York State, as blue as this state was, had as a majority the Republicans in the New York State Senate. That was lost this past election in 2018. And they put this right on the front burner, the
Wow.
leftists in the Democrat Party, and they got it through.
Yeah, it's almost like they're just waiting, and they probably were. They were just waiting for the moment that they would have power, so
Yes.
then they could push this radical agenda. And it seems like a lot of the push in the Democratic Party is to just go as far left, as far radical as they can. And probably a lot of that is backlash against Trump. They just hate him so much
Right.
that they're willing to basically do anything as far away from his positions as they can. Now, I have a theory about why abortion is all of a sudden being pushed by the Democratic Party, and that is that they are feeling threatened because of Trump's appointees to the Supreme Court, Gorsuch, and then, Kavanaugh. We don't really
Right.
know what Kavanaugh is going to do, but the left fears him, and they're afraid that he will basically overturn Roe v. Wade. And whether he will or not is a question. It's starting to be a concern to pro-life people, but they think he will. And so my theory is that they're trying to preemptively pass all this legislation in states so that whether Roe v. Wade is reversed or not, it won't stop abortion at all in these states. You think that might be one of the reasons they're doing this?
Oh, definitely. There's a reaction. There's such hate Trump venom out there that they will throw babies under the bus. which kind of tells you what hate will do. And if Roe v. Wade was ever overturned, it is correct to put it in the jurisdiction of state governments, so that what New York has done at a U.S. Constitution level gives them the liberty to do that, though it
Right.
really isn't a liberty, but a license that they've given themselves to
They have the
say
power.
that, yeah, the power
They
to
have
do
the
that.
power to do it. And
Yep.
another thing that occurred to me is perhaps they also understand that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is probably going to be stepping down within the next year or so. She may be able to last another couple years until the next presidential election, but
Right.
probably she's not going to last as far as being active on the bench. And it could be that a lot of Democrats are scared about what's going to happen because they see that Trump would have another opportunity with a
Mhm.
third appointment to the Supreme Court. And they're really thinking that Roe v. Wade will be reversed, because I can't think of any other reason why New York State would all of a sudden push this through really quick, unless those Democrats think that Roe v. Wade is history, essentially, because of the situation that we have with those two appointees and then Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I mean, what do you think about Ruth Bader Ginsburg? Do you think she's going to be around on the bench for another year?
Yeah, I wouldn't. Uh, well, she does have a certain stamina that I find pretty amazing. That she keeps bouncing back. There's a resilience in what appears to be a frail physical body, but I also think that her agenda, which is leftist,
Fanaticism. Hmm.
anti-God, that just drives her.
Right.
So there's that element psychologically that helps to keep her going. And though the Republicans, or though the conservatives say they have a 5-4 advantage, I'm not real confident in Roberts, and I'm not all that confident in Kavanaugh.
I'm not either.
But that has the left still so afraid that they will take a horrific ruling such as Roe v. Wade, an unconstitutional ruling as Roe v. Wade, and say that it was a law that, or say that it was a ruling that still must apply to our society today.
Or try to interpret it in a way in their own state that makes it fully in effect no matter what the US government does. And I think that because of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, yeah, she has a lot of stamina. I know that Justice Kennedy uh, probably had better health than Ruth
Yes,
Bader Ginsburg, but he just said,
right.
I'm not going to die at the bench. I'd like to go home and I'd like to spend the last years of my life with my
Mhm.
family and pursue my other things. And so he retired. Ruth Bader Ginsburg now, she might be such an activist and a radical far leftist. She may say, well, I'm not going to leave unless they take me out in a coffin, because I am so committed to abortion and all these other things. And she may just get real stubborn and decide to not go. And it looks like Pastor Mel McGinnis has left. It looks like we lost the signal with him. So I'm just going to continue to finish out this program. And we were talking about the activity in New York. We didn't get into the activity in Virginia with the governor. We got into it a little bit. I think there's some other um, states that are also talking about abortion and trying to shore up these abortion liberalities. For example, Rhode Island, I think they're involved in trying to push through abortion legislation that would make it easier for women to have an abortion. In a number of other states, this is pending. So, um, the question is why? Why are they doing this all at once? Um, and there is Mel. He's back. Are you back? Yeah, no, he's back. His audio is back, it looks like, but his his picture isn't back yet. So, but I will wrap up this program and then we'll talk some more on our other program. And the fact is that we need to be praying that the Lord blocks these evil attempts like he did in Virginia. The Virginia legislation, that bill, that radical bill that we saw proposed by this uh, assemblywoman or senator down there was defeated. Thank God that was defeated. But we still have that governor down there in Virginia that is talking about infanticide. And that's really bad. There we go. There we are. Mel, up. You were back just a second ago.
Hey, there we
And
go.
there we go. I was just talking about the fact that this kind of abortion mentality has been spreading to other states. And I was talking about there's Rhode Island that is working on some legislation that would promote abortion, and some other states too. And
Right, Vermont.
Vermont.
Right. Massachusetts, I believe, may be thinking about it as well.
Yeah. And this kind of mentality, as Christians, we need to be praying that those efforts are stopped, because after all, if Roe v. Wade does collapse, and we pray that it does, it would be pushed back to the states. Now, if these states have these radical abortion agendas and legislation in place, then in those states, there is no difference between the status quo today and what they would have after a Roe v. Wade overturn, right?
York's position would still stand. Even if the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, New York's law, as it is now and has been recently passed, would still stand.
Right. Unfortunately, that's true. So we can't, I think there's a temptation for some pro-lifers to say, well, if we can just get Roe v. Wade overturned, that would end abortion. It wouldn't end abortion. Now, it could, and it would definitely end abortion in some states. There are already a handful of states that if Roe v. Wade would be overturned this year or next year, automatically the abortion would be banned in those states, which is a blessing. That is a great thing. And we just pray that Roe v. Wade is overturned. But in these other states, no, abortions would continue on as before, or even be more radical than before. So this is very disturbing. Some of these other states like Rhode Island, Vermont, and now here in New York, very disturbing developments. They're getting ready, preemptively preparing themselves for the day that Roe v. Wade is overturned, which on one level, I'm glad they're thinking that Roe v. Wade will be overturned, because they may have some insight. They may have some knowledge. They may have some information about Ruth Bader Ginsburg stepping down soon. And that's why they're trying to push this through. I hope that is correct. I hope she does retire and that Trump gets to appoint another conservative justice. But again, we still have to realize that this does not automatically end abortion. It just pushes it back to the states, where then the states control it instead of the federal government. Well, that's been an interesting discussion. We need to pray and continue to pray that God ends this Holocaust. And we'll see you all with another program. God bless.